Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. We've got a really cool set of materials for you today, and it's all about, upping your English listening skills.
Yeah.
Really, the whole point of this deep dive is how can we find the most effective, the best ways to, help you guys understand English better
Absolutely.
out in the real world.
Yeah.
At work, school, or just enjoying like movies and TV shows.
Exactly. So we've gone through and really tried to pick out the most immediately actionable steps that you can take to improve.
To just get better at listening.
Yeah.
And I think a good place to start is kind of this idea of listening being like the most fundamental skill. Right?
Yeah.
It's the thing that kind of comes before speaking.
Yeah.
And it really unlocks like how to communicate with native English speakers.
Sure.
Whether that's listening to this podcast or watching a TV show or, just talking to somebody.
Yeah.
So let's jump right in. I think the first area we kind of wanted to cover is how to make this process effective but also enjoyable.
Yeah. And this is such an important connection because when you're enjoying what you're doing, your brain is just way more receptive to learning. You pick up information more effectively. You remember it better.
So let's unpack this idea of enjoyable content. It's simple, really.
Yeah.
The idea is to start with something in English that actually interests you.
Yeah.
So if you love football or basketball or baseball or whatever, go and find English podcasts, YouTube channels, whatever.
Sure, if it's movies, if it's TV series, if it's music, really lean into that, you know? Find those podcasts, those films, those shows. And I think the reason that this works so well is because it reduces that feeling of overwhelm that some people get when they start to learn a language.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like homework.
Exactly. It feels like an extension of something that you already enjoy doing.
Yeah. So it's also about finding that sweet spot, that starting point where you feel comfortable.
Right.
Right. So start with something that you feel like, okay, I can kind of understand most of this.
Yeah.
And then as you get better, as your ear gets more tuned, as you get more confident, then you can start to look for more challenging things.
For sure. And it's like anything else that you learn, right?
No.
You wouldn't go out and try and run a marathon, without training for it first.
Yeah.
And it's the same with listening. You have to build up that stamina.
Yeah. And I think, don't forget about music either. Listening to English music can be like such a great way to just kind of, immerse yourself in the rhythm and the flow of the language.
Yeah, totally.
So don't worry about understanding every lyric at first.
Yeah.
Just enjoy the music and let it kind of, flow over you.
Exactly. And pick out the words that you do know.
Yeah.
And then you can always, go back and look at the lyrics and kind of fill in the gaps. But I think the key here is to really tap into those things that you're already passionate about.
For sure.
Because it's when it's connected to something that you already love that the listening becomes, less of a chore. It becomes part of your leisure time, your fun time.
Yeah. So big takeaway number one, find the things you're interested in English and start listening. But now that we've talked about enjoying it, how do we actually make sure that this enjoyable listening turns into better comprehension?
Right. How do we get better at actually understanding what we're hearing?
Yeah.
And I think, this comes down to the idea of active listening.
Right.
So it's not enough to just passively hear the sounds. You have to actively engage your mind, to process and to understand those sounds.
Exactly. It's not just having the radio on in the background while you're doing something else.
Right.
It's about really focusing on the words, on the message the speaker's trying to get across.
Yeah.
Thinking about the context.
Yeah.
One technique that I think is really effective is summarization.
Yeah.
So you listen to a short little bit of audio, maybe a couple sentences, maybe a short paragraph, and then just pause it and try to say back, in your own words what you just heard.
And this is such a powerful technique because it forces your brain to actively process the information. You're not just hearing the words.
Yeah.
You're actively constructing meaning from them, and then, you're expressing that understanding. So it's a much deeper level of engagement.
Absolutely. And I think even just mentally repeating some of the key phrases or sentences that you just heard.
Yeah.
In your head, it can help a lot.
For sure.
And don't forget up that rewind button. If you miss something, it's not a big deal. Just rewind it, listen to it again.
Exactly. And I think the act of repetition really allows you to focus on different layers of the audio. So the first time you listen to something, maybe you just get a general overview. But then, second or third time you listen to it, you can zoom in on specific vocabulary words or pronunciation details or, the overall flow of the language.
Yeah. So big takeaway number 2, don't just passively listen.
Right. Be active.
Actively engage with what you're hearing, summarize it, rewind if you need to.
Yeah.
But now you've got these solid strategies for how to engage with the content. How do you actually push yourself to get better and better?
How do you keep growing?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And I think this is where the idea of gradually challenging yourself comes in.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance, staying within your comfort zone enough to keep enjoying the process, but also pushing yourself just outside of that comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah.
To keep growing.
Exactly. So once you're feeling pretty comfortable with, the easier stuff, it's time to introduce something a little more challenging.
Right.
So maybe instead of simple conversations, maybe you start listening to news podcasts or interviews about things you're interested in.
Yeah. And it might feel more difficult at first.
Yeah.
But that's normal. That's a good sign. It means that you're stretching your listening muscles.
Right.
And there's so much great content out there that can help you with this.
Yeah.
TED Talks, for example.
Oh yeah.
They cover a huge range of different subjects, and you can pick, whatever you're interested in.
Yeah.
And they use more complex vocabulary, more complex sentence structure.
For sure. Or educational podcasts.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're really into, I don't know, history or science or business.
Yeah, or whatever.
Find a podcast about that.
Yeah. And let's not forget about the incredible variety of English accents out there.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
English is spoken in so many different ways around the world.
Yeah.
You have British English, American English, Australian English, Indian English, so many others. And each accent has its own unique rhythm, its own intonation patterns.
For sure. And getting exposure to all these different accents is so important for developing, really good comprehension.
Absolutely.
It might sound really different at first, but the more you hear, the more comfortable you'll get.
Exactly. And think of it this way, it's like learning to recognize a melody that's played on different instruments. So the core tune remains the same, but the kind of texture of the sound is different depending on the instrument. And it's the same with English accents. The fundamental language structures are there, but the way those structures are expressed phonetically differs depending on the accent.
And I think it's really important to remember that it's okay if you don't understand every word when you're first starting out.
Right.
When you're listening to something more challenging or, hearing a new accent, you don't need to catch every single word. The important thing is just to keep listening.
Keep going.
The more you hear, the more familiar it will become.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about pushing yourself for those challenges. Let's talk about how technology can help you.
Yeah. Technology has become such a powerful tool for language learning.
For sure.
And there are so many amazing resources out there.
Yeah. There are so many amazing apps.
Yeah. Specifically designed for English listening practice.
Yeah, like Speechling or BBC Learning English.
Exactly. These are great apps. And then, beyond the apps, there are so many websites that offer free English listening practice materials.
Yeah.
And a lot of these come with transcripts, which I think is really helpful.
Yeah.
Because you can read along as you listen. Or you can, listen first and then go back and look at the transcript and see, what words you missed or what parts you didn't understand.
And I think one thing that people often overlook is the playback speed controls.
Yes.
So if you're listening to something and it's just too fast,
right,
just slow it down,
yeah.
Especially if it's, a new accent or something that's more challenging, just slow it down.
And this gives your brain that extra time to process the sounds.
Yeah.
And to connect those sounds with meaning.
Yeah.
So it's really helpful, especially when you're, encountering new vocabulary words or complex sentences that are spoken at a natural pace.
Yeah.
And then as you get more comfortable, you can gradually increase the speed back up to normal.
Yeah. And another great tool is subtitles.
Yes.
So if you're watching movies or TV shows in English, just turn on the English subtitles.
Right.
And that way you can see the words as you're hearing them.
Exactly.
And that can help you with your vocabulary, it can help you with pronunciation.
Yeah, so you're engaging both your auditory and your visual senses.
Yeah.
Which can be really helpful.
So technology, gives us all these amazing tools, but in the end, it really comes down to consistent effort.
Absolutely. It's about putting in the time and the effort,
Yeah.
consistently.
And it doesn't have to be like hours and hours every day.
No. Even short bursts of practice, 10, 15 minutes a day can make a huge difference.
Yeah, just make it part of your routine.
Yeah.
So listen to a podcast on your way to work, or, while you're making dinner, or while you're, whatever.
And what's amazing is that over time, your brain will actually start to process English more quickly and more efficiently.
Yeah.
You'll start to understand more and more without even having to think about it. It'll just become more automatic.
Yeah.
And it's so important to remember that language learning, it's a gradual process. So don't get discouraged if you don't see like massive improvements immediately.
Yeah.
Just be patient with yourself, keep practicing, and you will get there.
Yeah. So to sum it all up, improving your English listening skills, it's a journey. It's all about finding content that you enjoy.
For sure.
It's about actively engaging with what you're hearing.
Yeah.
Trying to summarize it, rewinding if you need to. It's about, gradually pushing yourself with more difficult stuff. It's about using technology to your advantage.
Yeah.
And most importantly, it's about practicing consistently.
Absolutely. And I think the key thing that ties all these elements together is the idea of enjoying the process.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying it, if it feels less like an obligation and more like a natural extension of your interests, you're just so much more likely to stick with it.
For sure.
And that's what leads to, real progress.
So here's something to think about, Think about one of the strategies that we've talked about today. Just one. And how could you incorporate that into your daily routine?
Yeah.
How could you start using it like right now?
Right.
And what new doors might that open up for you? What new content might you be able to enjoy?
Absolutely.
It's all about taking that first step.
Yeah.
And
keeping your ears open, keeping those ears tuned in.
All right. Thanks for tuning in to the Deep Dive.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. See ya.
All right. Welcome in, everyone, to the Deep Dive. We're all about leveling up your skills today. And you know me, I love a good challenge. So we're tackling something pretty fundamental, but so important. How to get better at reading in English.
It really is fundamental,
Oh, yeah.
And it might seem basic, but it's amazing how many people hit a plateau, they get stuck.
Exactly.
And they don't realize that improving reading can unlock so many other things in English.
That's what we're diving into today. We've got a ton of great material to work with, all these practical tips and strategies, and we're going to sift through it together and figure out what's going to be the most impactful, no matter if you're just starting out or you've been learning for a while.
Because everyone can get something out of becoming a stronger reader.
100%. And to kick things off, I think it's important to set the stage. Why is reading in English so crucial?
Well, think of it like this. Reading isn't just passively taking in words. It's an active process where you're building so many essential skills at the same time. You're expanding your vocabulary naturally. You're internalizing grammar rules without even realizing it.
It's like osmosis, right?
Exactly. You start to see the patterns of sentence structure, how ideas flow together. And all of this feeds directly into your overall fluency and your confidence when you use English. It's the foundation.
Okay, so that's the big picture. Now let's get tactical. The first big idea that really jumped out at me from the source is this. You have to read what genuinely grabs your interest. It sounds so obvious, but how many of us have slogged through stuff we find boring?
I know I have, and it just makes the whole experience feel like a chore.
Exactly. It's like, why are we doing this to ourselves?
Yeah.
But the key takeaway here is that the more engaging the material is, the more you're going to actually absorb and learn. It shouldn't feel like a burden.
Right. It's all about shifting that mindset from I have to read to I want to read, and that makes all the difference.
So what are we talking about specifically? I mean, the great thing is it can be anything that sparks your curiosity. Novels, articles, blogs, even scrolling through those social media feeds you love. There's so much English content out there.
And think about it. If you're passionate about travel, explore blogs or books about different destinations.
Oh, for sure. Or like, if you're a tech person, dive into tech news websites, online magazines.
Exactly. And when you're reading about something you're already invested in, those new words, those phrases, they just stick better because they have real meaning and context for you. You're not just memorizing them in isolation.
It's not just random vocabulary floating around in your head. It's connected to something you care about.
And on a deeper level, what's happening is your brain is activating existing knowledge, those mental frameworks we have for things we already understand. This makes it so much easier to process new information and connect those new words and ideas to something you already know.
So we found something we're excited to read. Great. Now, how do we make sure we actually stick with it? Well, step 2 from the sources is all about consistency. It's not just about finding the time. It's about making it a regular habit.
Even short bursts of reading can make a huge difference. 10, 15 minutes each day, consistently, can be more effective than trying to cram in a whole bunch of reading once a week.
Totally. Think of it like exercise. You wouldn't expect to run a marathon by only training once a month, right? It's the same with language.
Right. It's those small, regular workouts that build strength and stamina. So weave reading into your daily routine.
Exactly. On your commute, before bed, during your lunch break, those little pockets of time really add up.
And don't feel like you have to jump into War and Peace right away.
Okay.
Start with shorter articles, short stories.
Something manageable.
Exactly. And then you can gradually work your way up to more complex material as you get more comfortable.
As you build that reading muscle, it becomes less and less intimidating. And what I found really interesting is that the sources were pretty adamant about not letting unfamiliar words derail you.
Yes. This is where step 3 comes in.
Yeah.
Using a dictionary wisely.
But not constantly, right?
No, not for every single word. The idea is to try to figure out the meaning from the context first. Look at the surrounding sentences, the overall topic. You can often get a pretty good idea of what the word means without interrupting your flow.
Right. It's a great way to train your brain to think critically about the language. You're not just relying on a dictionary to spoon-feed you every definition.
Plus, sometimes those dictionary definitions can be a little,
A bit dry.
Yeah, a bit dry. They don't always give you the full picture of how a word is actually used. So seeing it in action within a sentence, within a real context, that's golden.
And if you absolutely can't figure it out from the context,
then by all means, grab that dictionary.
But the sources have this great tip. Don't just read the definition and move on. Try writing your own sentence, using that new word. That's going to help it stick in your memory so much better.
It's about making it active. You're not just passively absorbing information, you're engaging with it, you're processing it.
You're making it your own.
Exactly. And there are some fantastic online dictionaries that make this even easier. Word Reference, Merriam-Webster, they often have audio pronunciations and multiple example sentences.
So you can hear how it's pronounced and see it used in different ways.
Exactly.
Okay, ready for a technique that might surprise you. Step 4 is all about reading aloud. And the sources make a really compelling case for why this is so beneficial for your comprehension.
Think about it. When you read aloud, you're engaging more of your senses. You're seeing the words, you're hearing yourself say them, you're physically moving your mouth to form the sounds. It's a much more immersive experience.
It's multisensory learning in action. It forces you to slow down, pay attention to each word, and really process what you're reading.
And there's this added bonus too. It helps you improve your pronunciation and intonation, which is so important when you're speaking English. You get to hear yourself, identify any areas where you might be struggling, and then you can use those dictionary apps or online tools to check and refine your pronunciation.
It's like a 2-for-1 deal. You're working on your reading and your speaking skills simultaneously.
Exactly. Start with short passages, focus on getting the sounds right, and don't be afraid to sound things out.
Okay, moving on to step 5. The sources really emphasize the importance of branching out and reading a variety of materials.
It's so easy to get stuck in a rut, to only read one type of text.
Right, like only novels or only news articles.
But the thing is, different types of writing use different vocabulary, different sentence structures, different tones. So by exposing yourself to a variety of materials, you're becoming a more versatile reader. You're training your brain to adapt to different styles.
And the sources point out some really interesting differences, like news articles often use more formal language and might have a lot of specialized terminology depending on the topic.
Right, and then you have novels, which might have more descriptive language, more complex sentence structures because they're telling a story.
It's about becoming a more well-rounded reader, basically. And that's going to help you in so many real-world situations.
Absolutely. Think about all the different types of English you encounter every day. Websites, emails, social media instructions.
Signs, menus.
Exactly. The more diverse your reading habits, the better equipped you'll be to understand and navigate all of that.
All right, ready for step 6. This one's all about active reading. Taking notes and highlighting key information as you go. It's a simple technique, but it can make a huge difference in how much you actually retain from what you read.
When you're highlighting or underlining, you're forcing yourself to make decisions about what's important, what's worth remembering. You're not just passively letting the words wash over you.
And it creates a visual record that you can refer back to later. You can quickly scan your notes and refresh your memory on the key takeaways.
The sources also suggest jotting down any words or sentences that you find confusing. That way you can come back to them later and do some extra research if you need to.
It's like creating your own personalized study guide as you read.
Exactly. And then the real power move, try summarizing what you've read in your own words. Whether it's a paragraph, a section, or the entire text, taking the time to synthesize the information and express it concisely is such a powerful way to check your understanding and solidify those concepts in your memory.
Plus, it gives you some extra writing practice on the side, which is never a bad thing.
Never a bad thing.
Okay, last but not least, step 7 brings in the social element. Joining a reading group or finding a reading partner. This is about sharing the experience with others, having discussions, and keeping each other motivated.
It can be so beneficial to talk about what you're reading with other people. Get to hear different perspectives, maybe pick up on details you missed, and it just makes the whole process more enjoyable.
The sources talk about connecting with friends, classmates, even online communities. There are tons of online book clubs and groups dedicated to English learning.
And even if you're just reading with one other person, that sense of accountability can be really helpful, give you that extra nudge to stay consistent with your reading goals.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. What are the real core principles we've uncovered for becoming a more effective English reader?
I think it boils down to this: consistent practice, varied materials, and active engagement. Make reading a regular habit, explore a wide range of texts that genuinely interest you, and don't be afraid to interact with the material. Use your dictionary strategically, read aloud, take notes, highlight, summarize, and connect with other readers.
It's about being an active participant, not just a passive observer.
100%.
So as we wrap things up, here's something to think about. How can you integrate even just one of these strategies into your daily routine? Could you commit to reading a short article every morning on a topic you love? Maybe start highlighting key vocabulary. Even small, consistent changes can make a world of difference.
You really can.
What kind of English material are you feeling inspired to explore now? Let us know in the comments. And as always, thanks for diving in with us.
Until next time.